decades.
Welcome
right?
to the
The
deep
U.S.
dive.
government
We're here
line
to
was
sift through the
basically
sources, cut through the noise,
supernatural stuff,
and get you the
psychic
core
powers,
knowledge.
telepathy, seeing
Today,
things far away
we're
with your
heading
mind.
to
Pure
ancient Egypt.
fantasy. That's what they
Specifically
told
Abydos,
Yeah, that was
the
the public
spiritual
face.
center,
Complete
the legendary
skepticism.
burial
But,
place of
everyone.
Osiris.
While that was the official
But we're not
story,
really looking at the
behind
usual
closed
temples
doors,
today. We're actually
something
going deeper.
something
Literally.
much stranger.
We're talking about the
was apparently
Osireion.
going
It's
on.
this huge,
deep inside the
megalithic
intelligence community.
structure.
It's a really interesting contrast,
completely
isn't
buried
it? Publicly,
beneath
it's all
the famous
scientific
temple of
dismissal.
Seti-Sar.
Privately,
Right, it's almost
the
hiding in
Pentagon,
plain
the
sight.
CIA.
Seti-Sari's temple,
They're
that's the
clearly
one everyone
wrestling
knows.
with something
Beautiful,
very different.
intricate
These
carvings,
fantasies
new
suddenly
kingdom
become
stuff, maybe
a
3,300
serious
years
strategic
old.
issue.
Exactly.
This thing
and that
underneath,
worry, that sort
well, it
of
looks like it
creeping
belongs
fear
to a
about
whole
psychic
different world,
warfare, it
maybe-
leads to one of
maybe
the
even before
honestly
the
most
Pharaohs.
bizarre
And that's
and
the
top
top-secret
secret
projects
projects
of
of
the
the
whole
Cold War.
the
The
Osireion's
Osireion's architecture, the sheer
I
scale
mean, just
of
picture
the stones. It
an
just seemed
actual government
older,
project trying to
much older than
weaponize the
Seti's
human
temple
mind,
sitting
funded
right
off
on
the
top.
top.
Totally
So this
secret.
leaves us
And
with
officially, the
two
cover
main
story, or
competing
maybe the
stories.
initial
Okay,
idea
so the
was
first one, this is the
remote
standard
viewing.
Egyptology
Right.
take.
This
Seti, I built it.
supposed
It's a symbolic
ability
tomb,
for
like a
trained people
cenotaph,
to just
honor Osiris, the god of
perceive
resurrection.
distant
kind of
places,
replica.
secret
But the
enemy
second
bases,
idea,
maybe
which
even
you hear
peek into
from
the future, all
alternative
just using their
researchers,
minds.
is that this
And
is
we
way
should be
older.
clear, this
a
wasn't
leftover
some,
from
like,
some
side
lost
hobby. It wasn't
pre-pharaonic
just a few folks
civilization.
messing
Maybe
around.
even,
Okay.
This
before
was
the
a
Great
strategic
Flood
move.
legends.
Exactly.
A direct
So
response
our mission
to what
today
they
is to
thought
look at the
Soviets were
evidence. We'll
doing.
dig
They
into
were
the
urgently trying to get an
sources
edge
on the
in a
building itself,
completely
the
new kind of,
engineering,
well,
these
battlefield.
weird
And that's what we're
global
doing today. We're
connections,
gonna
even
peel
maybe
back
some
those
cosmic
layers of
codes.
secrecy,
We want to figure out what this
really,
structure really
deep
is,
dive
or at least
into
why it's so
Project
baffling, and
Sunstreak
frankly, why it seems so
and the kind
protected.
of wild
Okay, let's picture
conspiracy
it. You're
theories
at
that are still
Abydos.
swirling around
You
it.
see,
Yeah,
Seti
because
is
the story
temple,
goes way beyond
magnificent,
just
covered in
psychic
these
spying.
detailed
Oh, absolutely.
hieroglyphs.
It might have cracked
Classic
open the
new
door
kingdom
to,
art.
well,
That sets a
alien
benchmark,
contact,
right?
maybe
For
even
1300
some sources
BCE
suggest
technology
interdimensional
and
conflict.
style.
It gets pretty out
Absolutely.
there.
But
It
then
really
you
does.
find this narrow
So we're going to look at where it
passage,
came
usually
from, the
kinda
really
hidden away,
unsettling
and you
things that
descend.
viewers reported
And suddenly
seeing,
everything changes. You're in this massive,
weird
cool,
overlaps of
damp,
old occult
underground
stuff,
hall.
and these
The
incredible
Osireion,
claims about
dark, often
contacting
flooded, and the building style,
the unknown.
It's a
So yeah,
shock.
settle
Yeah,
in.
instead
This
of
is
that
where
finely
things get
carved
weird.
limestone
So
from
where did
above,
Sunstreak
you're
even
looking at
come
what they
from?
call cyclopean
It really
masonry,
kicks off back in
which
the early
means, for
70s.
you
There was this
listening,
sort of
stones
quiet
so
panic
ridiculously
brewing
huge that,
in
well,
the
later
intelligence
cultures
world
thought only
during the Cold
giants
War.
could have
Right.
moved them,
Word got
not
out
humans.
that the Soviets
And the
were
scale is
pouring
important.
serious
We're
money
talking about
and
these
effort into
enormous
parapsychology.
granite blocks,
and not just dabbling.
some
We're
way
talking
over 100
state-sponsored
tons.
experiments,
100 tons.
telepathy,
And when
moving
archaeologists
objects with
first
the mind,
uncovered it back in
psychokinesis,
1902,
and crucially,
even their reports
remote
sound
viewing.
baffled.
Yeah,
They
and
said
when
it
U.S.
looked, and I
intelligence
quote,
picked up on this,
unquestionably older than
alarms went
Seti's
off.
temple.
Big time.
The size,
Pentagon
the style,
especially.
you can imagine
It just
the fear,
doesn't fit.
right? What if this
And here's
stuff is
something
real?
that really
Even
makes
if it
you
only
think.
gives a small advantage.
If Seti had built this
The
massive
US could be
place to honor
completely
Osiris, arguably the
blindsided
most
in a
important
conflict
god,
that why is it
doesn't
so
use
bare? The
bombs or
sources are
spies
clear.
in the traditional
The
sense.
original
So
megalithic
this perceived
walls,
threat, this
no
potential
carvings,
psychic
no
gap,
inscriptions,
it
no
leads directly
hieroglyphs,
to the CIA's
nothing.
starting It's like the project builders only Stargate, cared about
which
raw
was kind
power,
of the umbrella
permanence,
program. And under
not
Stargate, you
decoration
get
or
these
telling a story.
sub-projects,
which makes
Project
that
Sunstreak was one of them, run by the Defense Intelligence Agency,
New
the
Kingdom
DIA,
Pharaohs
loved
mostly
putting
through
their
the
names and
1980s.
stories on
Okay.
everything.
So
Why build this
Sunstreak
giant thing and
gets
leave
going.
it blank?
It's a
And
major
on
inconsistency.
paper,
Okay, let's stick with the
its
architecture.
job sounds,
You mentioned the style.
well, almost
It looks a lot
straightforward
like
for
some
that
of the
world.
other really
Recruit
mysterious
people,
megalithic
train them
sites
as
in
remote
Egypt,
viewers.
doesn't
It
Mhm.
does.
Get
It
them to
strongly
project their
resembles the Valley
consciousness,
Temple and
basically,
the Sphinx Temple
and
down at
spy
Giza.
on Soviet facilities.
Structures often
Gather
dated to the
intel.
Old Kingdom.
Standard
sure.
espionage,
But
just
even
with
their
a very
style is
unconventional
distinct.
method.
But that's
More
not how it
massive
played
and
out, was it?
austere
It became
than
clear
the
pretty
pyramids
fast this
themselves.
wasn't just
That's
about
a key
finding
point.
missile silos.
That
So almost
style,
right away, the viewers weren't
huge,
just describing,
interlocking blocks,
submarine
no
pens
mortar.
or radar
It feels like
installations.
a
The data
signature of a
getting
different,
maybe much
weird.
earlier
Weird
building
how?
tradition.
Well, that was the big
Exactly.
turning
So
point.
even if
really.
SETI, I
The
was
viewers
copying an
started
older
reporting
style,
things
why
that,
copy the
based
style
on our
of the
normal
absolute
understanding of physics
oldest,
and
most
reality, just
enigmatic
shouldn't
structures?
exist.
Things that shouldn't
Structures that
exist.
some
Okay,
researchers
now we're
already
getting
argue
somewhere.
don't
Yeah,
fit the standard
the information
timeline
they were
neatly.
bringing back
Which brings
was
us
pushing
crashing
way
into that.
past the
How?
boundaries of what
How did
anyone
they do it?
expected.
These
It
granite
fundamentally
blocks, they
challenged
came
what the
from
program
Aswan,
was even
hundreds of
supposed to
miles
be
away.
doing. And they aren't just
So
dumped
tell me
there.
about
They're
these
perfectly
viewers.
cut,
They weren't just
shaped,
random people
often in
off the
complex
street, right?
polygonal forms.
Yeah.
Many had
and fitted
military
together
backgrounds.
That's right,
underground with this
often military
incredible
personnel.
precision.
You
And
literally
they went
could
through
have
this
slipped
really
paper between some of
specific,
these strands.
structured
Think about
training.
Underground.
Controlled
100-ton
protocols was
blocks.
the term, like
The
coordinate
official
remote
toolkit's supposed to
viewing
be
or
what,
CRV.
copper
CRV, okay. So it
right
wasn't
pounding
just
stones.
like
Cutting
closing your
granite,
eyes and
which is
hoping for the
incredibly
best.
hard
No,
rock.
very
To
systematic.
that level
They might
of
be given
accuracy,
just a set of
moving those
geographic
weights, assembling
coordinates
it
or
all,
maybe a
it
random number
stretches the
linked to a
standard
target.
explanation of
Then they'd go through
ancient
these
tech
stages,
to
sort of
breaking point.
drilling down,
maybe
describing
beyond.
sensory
Yeah,
details,
modern engineers look at
sketching
this and scratch their
impressions,
heads. It's a monumental
trying to
feat even
build
today.
a picture
And this is
of a
where
target
those
they knew
alternative
nothing
ideas
about
gain
consciously.
traction. People like Graham
Often
Hancock,
something
Robert
hidden
Bauval.
miles away, maybe
They look
even
at this and
sealed
say,
in
look,
an
this This has to be older.
right there in the
maybe
room.
thousands of years older
Actually.
than dynastic
Well, the early
Egypt,
results were
built by some
apparently
unknown culture with,
intriguing,
frankly,
impressive
some kind of advanced
maybe,
knowledge.
but small scale.
Maybe civilization
You know,
didn't start
sketches that
clinging
looked
in Egypt.
surprisingly like
Maybe
a
it
Soviet
restarted
factory.
on top of something much
Details
older.
about a
And this
hidden
specific
bunker
style
that
isn't
later
just in
matched
Egypt, is it?
spy
That's another
photos.
layer.
No,
Enough
it's
to
not.
keep the
And
funding
this is where it
flowing,
gets really
definitely.
wild.
Okay,
This
so it had
technique,
some legs.
these
Yeah.
giant,
But then, like you said,
mortarless,
things took a
perfectly
turn.
A
interlocking
sharp turn,
stones.
yeah, because it's
You see
one
it in
thing to
other
sketch a
places around the
building you
world.
shouldn't
Like
know about.
Sacsayhuaman
It's
in
something else
Peru.
entirely
The similarities
when
are
your trained military
uncanny.
viewers
Uncanny
start
is the
reporting
word.
experiences
But maybe
that
even
just
more significant is
flat out
Göbekli
defy the
Tepe
material
in Turkey.
world as we know
Okay,
it.
Göbekli
What-
Tepe.
what
That
kind of
site
things?
is dated to
Well,
around
get
12,000
this.
years
Some
ago,
viewers
right?
started
Correct.
reporting
Roughly 10,000
energy
BCE.
beings.
What energy beings?
That's
Yeah.
about 7,000
Not
years
people,
before
not animals,
Egypt's
just
first dynasty
conscious
is supposed to
energy
have
forms
started.
that were apparently
So if you
watching them
find
while they were doing
very
the remote
similar,
viewing.
watching
highly
the viewers,
sophisticated,
okay, that's
megalithic
great.
construction
Others
techniques
claimed
there,
they weren't
and
just
also
moving
here at the
across
Osireion.
space, but across
Well,
time,
the implication
getting
is
glimpses
enormous.
of ancient
A potential
history
global
or even
culture.
future events.
Way
Whoa.
back in prehistory.
Time travel.
It certainly points towards
That's what
something
they
like that.
reported.
Maybe some kind of
There's one
advanced
really
pre-flood
famous
civilization.
or
And you
infamous
mentioned floods.
account.
Most
A
ancient
viewer
cultures do
insisted
have
they
flood
saw
myths,
the Egyptian
including
pyramids
Egypt.
being
They do.
built,
And
but
this
not
brings
by
in geology.
Egyptians.
Dr.
by,
Robert
quote,
Schoch's work
tall,
looking at water
luminous
erosion
entities.
patterns on the
Luminous
Sphinx enclosure,
entities
for
building the
example.
pyramids.
His
Yeah.
argument
That
is that the
sounds
type
like
and
something
extent of
from a,
erosion suggests
fringe
rainfall
documentary.
exposure.
Exactly,
dating
except
back
these were
possibly
reports
to
coming
before
from
10,000
within a
BCE.
classified
Which would fit the
military
timeline
intelligence
of
program.
Göbekli
That's what
Tepe
makes you
and this
stop and
idea
think.
of
Yeah,
a lost
definitely.
older
Any other
layer of
examples?
Oh yeah,
civilization.
Precisely.
another one.
It
Just
lends
as strange.
geological weight to
A
the
viewer
idea that the
claimed they
Osireion
found
might be
hidden
one of these incredibly
spacecraft
ancient
under the
structures,
ice in
perhaps
Antarctica.
found and reused
Hidden
by the
spacecraft.
dynastic
Oh.
Egyptians,
Like
not
UFOs.
originally built by them.
It seems to be
Okay,
the
so if
implication.
the building itself
and
screams
guarded
ancient,
apparently.
what
by
about
some kind
its
of
purpose?
consciousness that resisted
Especially this
intrusion,
strange
like
feature.
a psychic guard dog,
The
but
water.
not a dog.
Right,
Okay,
the
wow.
water. The
So
main
these
chamber is
reports
basically
were just
always
ignored,
partially flooded.
filed away as
It
crazy.
sits below
Well,
the
officially,
natural
a lot
water
of the stuff
table.
was
Now
probably
you could
downplayed
just say,
or
oh, it's
buried,
groundwater
classified
leakage.
deep. But
But
inside
for the ancient
project,
Egyptians, water,
whispers started.
especially primordial
the idea
water,
took hold
was
that maybe
deeply
remote
symbolic.
viewing
It
wasn't just about
represented
spying
none,
on the
didn't it?
Soviets
The
anymore.
primeval ocean
Maybe-
of chaos from
maybe
which
it was about
everything
making
born.
contact.
And this is where it gets even stranger,
So if this
right?
structure
The connection
is linked
or
to
the
Osiris,
apparent connection
the
to
god of death, resurrection,
occult
rebirth,
practices, then
Yes,
maybe the
that's
water is
another
next
layer
them
to
at
this
all.
whole
Maybe
thing
it's
that's just
intentional.
fascinating.
Like a symbolic
People within
connection
the program
to the
apparently
source of
started
creation
noticing
or
these
the
disturbing
underworld.
parallels
both. A liquid
between the
boundary.
remote viewing
The
techniques they were
Osireion,
developing
sitting in
and
these waters of
refining,
Nun, becomes
and
a physical
practices found in
representation
really
of the journey
old
through the
occult
underworld.
traditions.
Maybe a place
Occult
for
traditions,
initiation,
like
like a portal.
A portal.
Methods
That's a big
described in
idea, but there might be more
esoteric
technical
orders.
aspects
Groups
too.
like
Geometry,
the Hermetic Order of the Golden
astronomy,
Dawn,
Yes,
or the
definitely.
Rosicrucians.
When researchers have
Okay.
mapped the
They were
layout,
looking
the
at
proportions
rituals for
apparently
astral
align very closely
projection,
with
achieving
principles of
trance
sacred
states,
geometry.
intense
Things like the golden mean
visualization
show up in the
exercises,
dimensions.
the
The
whole
golden
idea of
mean
separating
phi.
your consciousness
That
from your
suggests
physical
really
body.
advanced
Wait, so the technique
mathematical knowledge
Sunstreak was teaching
baked
its
into the
military
design.
viewers.
Not just rough
seem
blocks
to
piled up.
directly
Not at all.
mirror
It implies a
these
sophisticated
ancient
understanding of
mystical practices.
mathematical
It's quite
harmony and
striking when you put
proportion
them side by
applied to
side.
So
these
the question
massive
becomes,
stones.
that's
Uh-huh.
was
that's
the
another
Pentagon,
layer of
was the
unexpected
DIA
knowledge.
And cosmic
inadvertently
alignments.
stumbling onto,
There are claims,
or maybe
yes.
rediscovering
Strong correlation
some kind of
suggested
ancient
between the
technique,
layout
something
and the
mystics and
constellation
secret
Orion,
societies
which of
have
course
been
is the
using for
celestial
centuries.
counterpart to
That's the
Osiris.
implication.
So
yeah.
advanced
Was
math,
this military
advanced astronomy
intelligence program
built into
actually
this
an
incredibly
unwitting or maybe
ancient,
witting
massive
occult
structure.
experiment?
It starts to paint a picture of
mind-bending
builders
thought.
with a
And it
very
didn't
different
stop
kind
there,
of
did it?
knowledge
The
than
experiences
we
got
usually
darker.
attribute to
They
that era.
did. Some
Or
viewers
any known
started
Egyptian
reporting
era,
encounters with
Which leads to
actively
even more
hostile
speculative
presences.
ideas.
Well,
Like,
hostile.
was it just
How?
a tomb?
They describe,
Like something
entering
else,
a location,
machine
mentally
That's the fringe
projecting their
theory.
consciousness
But
there
it's based on
only
some
to be
interesting
confronted,
observations.
not
We
by
know
human
other
guards,
ancient sites
but
like the
by
Great
what they
Pyramid
described as
seem to have
shadowy
peculiar
entities,
acoustic
things
properties.
that
They
seemed
resonate at
fully
specific
aware of their
frequencies.
psychic
And the
intrusion
Osireion
and
too.
actively tried
Apparently,
to block
yes.
them or push
Sound
them
engineers
out.
have done
Aware of them.
tests.
Yeah.
Like
They found that
psychic
certain
guards.
low frequencies
Essentially,
cause
yes,
the entire
which
chamber
raises a really
built of that hard
profound
granite to
and
vibrate,
frankly unsettling
hum.
possibility.
Which is, people report
Well, if
feeling
the
this
human
low
mind mind can
pulsing
actually travel
vibration in their
outside the
bodies
body?
when those
Maybe.
frequencies are
Maybe
present.
those
Wow.
non-physical
So not
realms
just
aren't
a
empty. Maybe
symbolic
other
place, but
intelligences
maybe a
already live
functional
there.
And maybe they don't
using
appreciate
sound,
visitors.
vibration.
Exactly. Entities
what?
that
Well, if it's
really
tied
didn't
to Osiris and
want people like
resurrection,
Sunstreak viewers
maybe
poking
for
around, it makes you
initiation
wonder,
rituals, altered
Was
states of
Sunstreak
consciousness,
opening doors that
healing.
had been
We don't
deliberately
know,
shut
but it
for a
suggests the
very long
possibility
time,
that it
for
was
a good
designed
reason?
to do
Okay, so if they
something
were opening doors,
using principles we barely understand,
what exactly
entering
did
that
they find on
darkness,
the other
experiencing
side?
those frequencies.
Because some of the most sensational claims
Maybe that was the
are
symbolic death
about,
and rebirth,
well, aliens.
communion with something.
If it was some kind of
Absolutely.
machine
This
or
is where the
portal
story
or
really goes into
center
high
for
gear.
potent rituals,
We actually have
maybe that
declassified
explains the
documents,
secrecy around it
fragments,
today.
hints
certainly
really
could.
that
The
suggest
modern situation
some
is
remote
odd.
viewing
Most
sessions were
tourists who visit
specifically
Seti's temple
targeting
right above
Mars.
have no idea
Mars.
the Osireion even
Like
exists down
the
below.
planet
Access is
Mars.
limited
flooded,
planet
right? Large
Mars.
parts are often flooded.
There's one
and officially
particularly
designated as
famous session,
restricted.
often cited,
Safety
where a
reasons,
viewer gave this
preservation.
incredibly
That's the usual
detailed
explanation.
description.
That's the official
They claimed
line.
they
But it
were
also
observing
conveniently
Mars
keeps people away
millions
from
of
the
years
most
ago.
anomalous parts of the
Millions.
structure.
And they
it
described
definitely
seeing these
fuels
tall
speculation.
beings sheltering
Speculation
inside
like
massive pyramidal
hidden
structures.
tunnels.
Pyramids on Mars.
Exactly.
Pyramids on Mars
There
as
are
their
these
planet was
persistent rumors,
dying
often
around
coming
them.
from
A
local workers over the
civilization
years,
facing extinction.
about sealed
Wow, okay.
passageways
That's quite a
leading
claim.
off from the main
It is,
chamber
and it wasn't
deeper
just
into the
Mars.
bedrock.
Other sessions
wasn't there a
allegedly
specific
targeted
incident
well-known
in
UFO
the late
hotspots and
90s?
crash
Yes,
sites
the
on Earth,
1999
including
story.
Roswell.
Of course, Reports surfaced that maintenance workers
And viewers
accidentally
reportedly
discovered a
described
stone
seeing
staircase
non-human
leading
bodies,
down from the
alien
western wall of
artifacts,
the main
all
chamber.
hidden away deep
Some were
inside
previously
classified
unknown.
government facilities.
According to the sources,
So not just
this
seeing
discovery
things
was very
far
quickly
away,
covered up.
but seeing
The staircase
things
was
the government
resealed
was
apparently,
actively
and there was
hiding.
no official
That's
announcement,
the
no
claim.
photos released.
It suggests the
Nothing,
viewers
just
weren't just
silence.
passive
Which, if
observers.
true,
They
is
were
incredibly
potentially
suspicious.
uncovering
Why
evidence
seal
of
it
an
up so
alien
fast?
presence
What were
that
they
was
afraid
being
of finding?
actively
Or
concealed.
afraid of
And
us
then there's
finding?
Wright-Patterson
It
Air
feeds
Force
into the
Base,
idea
right?
of academic
Always comes up in
reluctance,
these
or maybe
stories.
even suppression.
Wright-Patterson.
The theory
Another
goes
chilling
that
account
acknowledging
involved
the
a viewer
Osirian's
who
true
claimed
age,
they
its
psychically
baffling
entered a
construction,
hidden
it
chamber
would completely
deep
overturn
underground
the
there.
accepted
What
timeline
is
of
it?
Egyptian history.
Containers holding
Admitting a highly
biological
advanced culture might have
specimens that
existed
were
10,000
completely
or
unlike
12,000
anything
years
known
ago
on
in
Earth.
Egypt.
Alien bodies. That requires
basically.
rewriting
That's the
everything.
strong
It's
implication.
easier, perhaps,
And another
to stick
viewer,
with the
possibly
symbolic tomb
targeting
by
the same
SETI
location or a
explanation,
similar one,
despite the
claimed they
contradictions.
witnessed some kind
Keep it
of
contained.
psychic
Don't
network,
pull the thread
something
that unravels
connecting
the whole
human
narrative.
minds
Precisely.
to, well,
And maybe
something
that
else,
hidden history
something
connects back to
beyond our
Egypt's
world,
own
out among the
oldest
stars.
legends, the
A
time
psychic
before the Pharaohs.
network
Connecting us to
Zep-Tepi.
aliens.
That
first
was the
time.
report.
Right.
So you
When
look at all
Egypt was
these accounts
supposedly
together:
ruled by the
Mars,
Neteru,
Roswell,
These
Wright-Patterson,
divine
psychic
beings,
networks.
sometimes said
It
to
paints
come
a
from the
very
stars.
different picture than just spying
Could the
on the
Osireion be a
Soviets.
relic from that
Completely
mythical
different.
era?
If you take these reports
Built
at face
by or
value,
for
even
these
just
beings.
partially,
Its
the
style certainly
implication is
feels
huge.
non-human, or at least non-dynastic
Project Sunstreak
Egyptian.
So
might have
when you put
started
it all
as
together,
espionage, but it
the
seems to have
sheer
pivoted.
scale,
It
the
became
100-ton
about
blocks,
preparing for
the
contact
impossible
with
precision,
non-human
the
intelligence.
global parallels,
Or
the
maybe more
geometry,
cynically,
the
about making
potential
sure that
acoustic
contact
functions, the
remained a
secrecy,
secret,
the rumors,
kept far
the
away from the
Osireion
public
really
eye.
does stand out as
But the
this
theories don't even
massive
stop at
question
just
mark
ETs
carved
from
in
other
granite.
planets, do they?
Doesn't
Some
fit
people
the
take it
standard
even
story
further.
That's
at
right.
all.
It
There's
really
a whole
doesn't.
other branch
It
of
forces
theory
you to consider
suggesting
that history
Sunstreak
might be
wasn't
much
just
weirder,
encountering
much
extraterrestrials,
deeper,
but
and
potentially
less linear than we're
interdimensional
usually
beings.
told.
Interdimensional,
So as
like
you,
decades,
the listener,
right.
think about
The
all
US
this,
government
maybe the
line
question
was
isn't just
basically
who built the Osireion. Maybe it's why.
supernatural stuff.
What was it designed
psychic
to do?
powers,
Could its
telepathy,
very existence
seeing things
preserved
far away
beneath
with
the
your
sands
mind,
be a message,
pure fantasy.
a piece
That's what
of
they told
forgotten
everyone.
technology
Yeah, that was
or
the public
wisdom
face.
from a world
Complete
we've lost?
skepticism.
I think the key
But,
takeaway here is
you know,
that
while
the
that was the
stones
official
themselves
story, might hold
behind
memories are
closed
written
doors,
histories
some
are
think
forgotten. The Osireion
something
sits
much
there,
stranger
silent
was
yet
apparently
resonant,
going on,
suggesting human
deep
history isn't a
inside
straight
the
line
intelligence
forward, but
community.
maybe a spiral.
It's a really interesting
A spiral
contrast,
that
isn't
winds
it?
back into
Publicly,
ages
it's
we
all
barely
scientific
dream of.
dismissal.
It hints that we've
Privately,
only
the
just
Pentagon,
begun
the
to uncover
CIA,
the true depth of our past.
they're clearly wrestling with
Stone
something very
remembers even when
different.
we
These
forget.
fantasies suddenly
And the
become
Osireion, well,
a
it seems to
serious
remember a
strategic
very, very
issue.
long time ago.
Exactly.